The night my mother called me useless, the entire family laughed. I remember the sound more than the words. Forks clinking against plates, my uncle coughing to hide a smirk, my cousin recording something on his phone, and my mother sitting at the head of the table like a queen passing judgment, smiling as if she had just delivered a harmless joke. Some children are born to lead, she said, lifting her glass. And some well, some just exist. Her eyes shifted to me. The silence lasted 2 seconds. Then came the laughter. I smiled, and I said very calmly, "Oh, really?" That was the moment everything changed. I had always been the quiet one in the family, not the loud achiever like my brother, not the charming manipulator like my cousin. I didn't brag, I didn't argue, I observed, and I remembered. Growing up, I was never enough, not smart enough, not ambitious enough, not bold enough. Every mistake I made was magnified. Every success I achieved was minimized. When I graduated with honors, my mother said, "Imagine what your brother could have done with those opportunities." When I landed my first job, she said, "Let's see how long this one lasts." When I moved out and started my own business, she told relatives, "It's just a phase, he'll come back when reality hits." Reality never hit. Instead, I built quietly. While they mocked, I learned. While they underestimated, I prepared. At that dinner, my mother had invited everyone to celebrate my brother's promotion. A senior executive at a multinational firm, big salary, big applause, and me. I had been invited as background decoration. "Tell them what you're doing these days," my aunt said with fake curiosity. Before I could answer, my mother cut in. "He's experimenting with something online. You know how kids are these days. No stability, no real future." More laughter. I took a sip of water and looked around the table. 22 people. Family? Blood? None of them knew that the experiment they were mocking had just closed a 7-figure acquisition deal 2 weeks ago. None of them knew that the multinational company my brother worked for was one of our newest clients. And none of them knew who had quietly bought 18% of that company's parent shares through a holding group. Me, but I didn't say any of that. Instead, I leaned back and said, "You're right, Mom. Some people just exist." She smiled victorious. She thought she had won. You see, revenge doesn't start with anger. It starts with clarity. That dinner wasn't the first humiliation. It was just the last one I needed. 3 years earlier, when I pitched my first startup idea at a family gathering, my uncle laughed and said, "Stick to a stable job. Business is for risk takers." My brother added, "Or for people who actually know what they're doing." Even my mother said, "Don't embarrass yourself chasing dreams you can't afford." That night, I went home and wrote one sentence in my notebook. Never argue. Build, and I did. I studied market trends while they scrolled through gossip. I networked while they attended weddings. I failed silently, fixed silently, and scaled silently. Every insult became fuel. Every dismissal became strategy. By the time they realized I hadn't asked them for financial help in years, it was already too late to matter. Back at the dinner table, dessert was being served. My cousin was still recording clips for social media. My brother raised his glass and said, "To success." The kind that's visible. Everyone clapped. I clapped too. Visible success. That phrase stuck with me. Because what they didn't understand was this power is most dangerous when it's invisible. 2 days after that dinner, my brother walked into his office and was called into an emergency board meeting. The company was restructuring, new investors, new strategic direction, new performance evaluations. He didn't know that I had been in a private virtual meeting with the board 48 hours earlier. He didn't know that I had requested a full internal audit of leadership efficiency. He didn't know that I had asked one specific question. If you had to remove one executive to double profitability, who would it be? His name came up, not because I suggested it, because the numbers did. You see, revenge is sweeter when it doesn't look like revenge at all. That week, he started feeling pressure. Targets tightened, budgets scrutinized, his authority slowly chipped away. At home, my mother complained about his stress. "They're overworking him," she said during a phone call with me. "Some people don't understand his value." I almost laughed. Value. Funny word. The same week, I received a formal invitation to join the company's strategic advisory panel as a silent stakeholder representative. My name would not be public, but my vote would count. I accepted. Family dinner came again the following Sunday. This time, the mood was different. My brother was distracted, checking emails, barely eating. My mother was concerned. "You look tired." "Just corporate politics," he muttered. "New investors trying to prove themselves." I kept eating quietly. Halfway through dinner, my uncle turned to me again. "So, how's your little online project?" I wiped my hands with a napkin. "It's growing," I said calmly. "Growing into what?" He smirked. I looked at my brother. "Into influence." He frowned slightly but said nothing. Later that night, I received a confidential performance file. My brother had failed 2 internal projections. His department was under review. I didn't push. I didn't interfere. I simply let the system I helped build do its work. Weeks passed. At the next board session, a proposal was raised to replace the current regional executive with someone aligned to the new growth strategy. The vote would happen in 72 hours. That same evening, my mother called me. Her voice wasn't proud this time. It was anxious. "They're targeting your brother," she said. "Someone powerful is behind this." I stared at the city lights outside my penthouse window. Maybe. I replied softly, should have built something of his own. Silence. She didn't understand the weight of that sentence. The next day, my brother showed up at my apartment unannounced. He had never visited before. He looked around at the minimalist luxury, the skyline view, the quiet confidence in every detail. "You've been doing well," he said slowly. "Trying to," I replied. He hesitated. "Do you know anything about the new investors?" I held his gaze, and for the first time in our lives, he wasn't looking down at me, he was searching. I walked to the kitchen, poured 2 glasses of water, and handed him one. "Why would I asked. He studied my face. Because somewhere, deep down, he was starting to connect the dots. 3 years of silence, sudden growth in an industry linked to his company, strategic shifts that mirrored conversations we once had. He put the glass down without drinking. "If you're involved in this?" I stepped closer and smiled. "Then what?" The air between us tightened. He didn't answer. Because for the first time, he wasn't sure whether I was useless or whether I had been waiting. 2 days later, the board vote began, and I logged into the private session under a name he would never recognize. The final vote count was about to be announced. My screen glowed in the dark. My finger hovered over one final confirmation, and in that moment, my phone started ringing. It was my mother. I let it ring. The chairman cleared his throat and said, "The decision regarding the regional executive position is now finalized." I leaned back in my chair and smiled. But before the outcome was revealed, before the name was spoken aloud, the chairman added one unexpected sentence that made my blood run coldy. "There is, however, one complication we did not anticipate. There is, however, one complication we did not anticipate." The chairman's voice shifted subtle, but sharp enough to cut through my calm. "There appears to be a counter-acquisition in motion. A private buyer has been accumulating voting power quietly over the past quarter. If this transfer finalizes before market open tomorrow, the balance of control changes entirely." My spine straightened. That wasn't me. I had moved carefully, strategically, but never recklessly. My shares were secure, my influence measured. I didn't rush. I didn't gamble. So who was moving faster than I was? The board members began murmuring. Numbers were being recalculated in real time, percentages flashing across screens, control blocks shifting like tectonic plates beneath corporate earth. "Do we know who the buyer is?" someone asked. "Shell structure?" the chairman replied. "Layered. Offshore." A chill crept up my arms. Layered. Offshore, that was my method. But this wasn't my move, which meant one thing. Someone had studied me. The meeting was temporarily suspended while legal teams scrambled to verify the filings. I muted my microphone and immediately opened a second encrypted dashboard, my private monitoring system. If a major block of shares had shifted, I would see it. There, a spike. 8%, then 11%, then 14%, moving with surgical precision. Not random buying, not panic traded. The acquiring entity name appeared as a holding group I had never seen before. But the pattern was familiar. It mirrored the way I had built my own position. Slow accumulation fragmented across smaller funds masked through intermediaries. Someone had reverse engineered my strategy. My phone vibrated again. This time it wasn't my mother. It was a private number I hadn't seen in years. I answered. A calm, older male voice spoke. "You've grown." I didn't respond. I was wondering when you'd notice. Recognition hit me like a punch to the ribs. 3 years ago, when I first tried to raise seed capital for my startup, there was one investor who didn't laugh at me. He didn't mock me, he didn't dismiss me, he declined politely. But he watched, he asked questions no one else did, and at the end of our meeting, he said something I never forgot. "If you survive the humiliation phase, you might become dangerous." His name was Victor Hale, and he had been silent ever since. "Are you behind this?" I asked evenly. "Behind what?" He replied, lightly. "The company reshuffle, or the emotional chess match you're playing with your own blood." So he knew, not just about the shares, about my brother, about the board, about everything. "You've been tracking me," I said. "Mentoring," he corrected, "from a distance." I felt something I rarely allowed myself to feel. Uncertainty. "You taught yourself power," Victor continued. "But power without protection is fragile. You moved too visibly in the shadows. I was careful. You were predictable." The words stung more than it should have. "I'm not your enemy," he added, "but I am testing you. Be destabilizing my position. By forcing you to choose." Silence filled the space between us. Back in the board session, notifications were flashing. Legal confirmations rolling in, the counter-acquisition was real. And it was about to cross the threshold that would override my voting weight entirely. "What do you want?" I asked. "Nothing," Victor said. "This isn't about me. It's about whether you understand the cost of what you're doing." "I understand it perfectly." "No," he said softly. "You understand strategy, not consequence." My jaw tightened. "This is business." "No," he replied. "This is personal, and personal vendettas distort clean execution." I glanced at the board dashboard again. The new buyer had reached 19%. 1% more, and they would hold the swing vote. "You're trying to block me from removing my brother," I said. "I'm trying to see if you remove him for power," Victor replied, "or for pain." The line went quiet. Then he added something that made my pulse spike. By the way, your brother isn't the only one under review. The call ended, I stared at the dark screen for a long moment. Then I reopened the internal audit files. And there it was, a new document uploaded less than 10 minutes ago. Executive Performance Review, Strategic Advisory Oversight. My name wasn't public within the company, but my digital fingerprint was. Someone had traced influence patterns back to my advisory votes, back to my recommendations, back to me. If exposed, the narrative wouldn't be strategic investor. It would be vengeful sibling manipulating corporate structured. The board session resumed. The chairman's voice returned, controlled but tense. The counter acquisition has reached 20%. This introduces a shared control scenario. We will now proceed with the final vote under revised distribution, meaning my clean majority was gone. I still had influence, but not dominance. The digital ballot appeared on my screen again. Remove regional executive, yes or no. 3 years of humiliation, 3 years of silence, 3 years of building toward this moment, all condensed into one button. My brother called me again, not my mother. Him. I declined it. The vote timer began counting down from 60 seconds. In another part of the city, he was likely sitting in a glass office, staring at a screen, unaware that the person with the most power over his future wasn't an anonymous investor. It was the brother he called directionless. 30 seconds. My mind raced, not emotionally, but analytically. If I removed him now, under split control, it would trigger scrutiny, investigations, media speculation. If I didn't remove him, he would remain in position, but weakened. Dependent. Exposed. 20 seconds. Victor's words echoed. Choose. Power or pain. 10 seconds. And then something unexpected happened. A new notification appeared on the shared board channel. An emergency disclosure request filed by my brother. My eyes scanned the document preview. He was voluntarily requesting a temporary step down pending review. What? The chairman paused the vote. This is unusual, he muttered. My brother had just preempted the removal. By stepping down himself, he avoided termination and protected his reputation. It was a defensive masterstroke. Either he had exceptional instincts, or someone had warned him. Victor. Of course, I leaned back slowly, so this wasn't just about testing me, it was about evolving him. The chairman continued, given this voluntary action, the vote is suspended. A successor will be appointed on interim basis. The removal button disappeared from my screen. Just like that, the clean execution I had engineered for years dissolved into complexity. My phone buzzed with a message, not from Victor, from my brother. We need to talk. No ego, just truth. I stared at the words. For the first time, there was no arrogance in his tone, no superiority, just urgency. Outside my window, the city lights flickered like distant signals in a war I thought I controlled. But control is an illusion when someone else understands your playbook. Another message arrived, this one from an unknown encrypted sender. The holding group accumulating shares had just transferred 5% directly into a trust. The beneficiary name made my breath catch. It was my mother's, and the trustee overseeing it, Victor Hale. I stood up slowly from my chair. This was no longer just corporate chess. This was something deeper, a forced reckoning. My mother had no idea she was holding the deciding power in a multi-million-dollar corporate battle between her sons. Or maybe she did. My phone rang again. This time, I answered. It was her. Her voice was trembling. What have you two done? I didn't speak, because for the first time, I wasn't sure who had made the first real move in this game. And somewhere across the city, my brother was driving toward me. Not as a rival, not as a superior, but as someone who had just realized the houseless son wasn't playing for approval anymore. He was playing for control, and now the control was slipping into hands neither of us fully commanded. What have you two done? My mother's voice wasn't mocking now. It wasn't proud. It wasn't sharp. It was afraid. I walked back toward the window, watching headlights stream across the highway like restless thoughts. We didn't do anything, Mom, I said quietly. We just built what you taught us to build. Silence. You're talking in riddles again, she whispered. There are lawyers calling me. Something about shares, trusts, control. Your brother is on his way to you. He says you're involved in all of this. I didn't deny it, but I didn't confirm it either. Did you know, I asked. Know what? That you're holding 5% of a multinational corporation? She exhaled sharply. Don't joke right now. I'm not. The line went dead. She hung up. Or maybe the weight of what I said forced her to. 10 minutes later, my doorbell rang. I didn't rush. I didn't hesitate either. I opened the door to find my brother standing there, not in his usual tailored confidence, but in something close to disbelief. For the first time in our lives, we were standing at equal height. He walked in without speaking. His eyes scanned the apartment again, but this time there was no judgment, only calculation. Victor Hale, he said finally. So he had connected that piece too. Yes. He approached me 2 months ago. That stopped me. Why? He said he was investing in long-term leadership potential inside the company. He asked me questions no one else asked. About vision, about resilience, about family, of course. And I asked, and I thought I impressed him. A faint, bitter smile crossed his face. Turns out he was measuring me. I crossed my arms. You filed for voluntary step down. Yes. Smart? His eyes narrowed. You were going to remove me. It wasn't a question. Yes. The word didn't echo. It didn't explode. It just sat there between us, heavy and undeniable. He nodded slowly, absorbing it. Because I'm incompetent. Hell, because you hate me. I shook my head. Because you never saw me. That landed. Harder than any corporate maneuver. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The rivalry that defined our lives had always been loud on the surface, but silent underneath. Competing for praise, for validation, for survival in a household where approval was currency. You think I had it easy, he finally said. I think you had it visible. He let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. You think being the favorite is power. It's pressure. Every promotion had to justify her belief in me. Every mistake felt catastrophic because I wasn't allowed to fail. I studied his face. There were cracks there now, human ones. And I wasn't allowed to succeed, I said calmly. Because it threatened the narrative. We stood in the middle of my living room like two CEOs negotiating a merger neither wanted but both needed. Victor told me something, he continued. He said if I survived this restructuring without clinging to ego, I might become stronger than before. He told me something similar, I replied. About choosing power or pain? My brother's jaw tightened. And what did you choose? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. A notification from the trust management system. The 5% under my mother's name had just been activated for voting authorization, which meant one thing. Someone had walked her through signing control rights. My brother saw the change in my expression. What is it? Mom just became the deciding vote. He stared at me. That's not possible. It is. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing now. She doesn't understand corporate governance. She doesn't need to, I said. She just needs to sign. And who's guiding her? We both knew the answer. Victor, the master observer, the one who never laughed at me, the one who tested us both. This was never about replacing you, I said slowly. It was about forcing confrontation. With what? With the foundation. My brother stopped pacing. You mean her? Yes. Our mother had built us into competitors without realizing she was constructing a battlefield, praise as reward, comparison as motivation, silence as punishment. And now she unknowingly held the power to determine which son controlled a corporation neither of us originally built. Another notification, emergency board session scheduled for tomorrow morning. Final restructuring vote, the deciding vote holder. Family trust representative, my mother, my brother sank into one of the chairs. If she votes against me, he said quietly. I'm finished, not finished, I corrected. Redirected. He looked up sharply. You still want this. I want balance. Maybe. We were both honest now. Brutally, he leaned forward, elbows on knees. If she votes for me, you lose strategic control? I know. And if she votes against me, I lose everything I built. Yes. Silence again. This wasn't about humiliation anymore. This was about legacy, about rewriting the story that had defined us since childhood. What do you suggest? He asked finally. That question alone told me everything had shifted. 3 years ago, he would have laughed at the idea of asking my advice. Now he was asking because he understood something critical. I wasn't playing small anymore. We talked to her, I said. Together? Yes. He hesitated. She'll think we're manipulating her. War, I said calmly. The question is whether we're manipulating her for dominance or for repair. He looked at me carefully. You're not as cold as you pretend to be, and you're not as confident as you act. A faint, reluctant smile passed between us. Then my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a notification, it was a live feed alert. Someone had leaked partial information about the restructuring to a financial news outlet. Speculation headline. Family power struggle influencing major corporate shift. My stomach tightened. If this narrative went public, the board would panic. Investors would question stability. Both of us could be forced out in favor of an external candidate. Victor's voice echoed in my memory. Consequence. This was escalation. Did you leak anything? My brother asked sharply. No, neither did I. Which meant someone else wanted the fire to spread. I opened the metadata on the leak. The source was internal, but not board level. Executive communications. My brother's department. His eyes widened as he read over my shoulder. Someone in my team, he muttered, or someone positioning to replace you permanently. This was no longer a duel between brothers. It was opportunists circling exposed leadership. My phone rang again. Victor. I answered on speaker. You're running out of time? He said calmly. Did you leak the story? My brother demanded. No, Victor replied evenly. But I anticipated it. You're enjoying this, I said. I'm observing growth. You're destabilizing a corporation, my brother snapped. No, Victor corrected. You destabilized it the moment personal rivalry entered governance. Silence. Then he added something that shifted everything. There is a third candidate the board is considering. External, clean reputation, no family entanglement. My pulse slowed. If appointed, Victor continued, both of you lose direct influence, and the trust, I asked, it becomes ceremonial. He was forcing us into unity, or annihilation. The vote is in 12 hours, Victor said. If you want control, you'll need alignment. The call ended. My brother looked at me. For the first time in our lives, we weren't opponents across a table. We were two pieces on a larger board. If we combine our shares and influence Mom's vote together, he said slowly, we block the external candidate. Yes, and then Then we rebuild the leadership structure jointly. He studied me, 50-50. It was the one thing neither of us had ever truly offered the other. Equal ground, equal voice, equal acknowledgement. I walked toward the window again, watching the city breathe beneath us. 3 years ago, I wrote Never Argue, Build. Tonight, I understood something deeper. Building alone creates power. Building together creates permanence. I turned back to him, but before I could answer, my phone vibrated with a final alert. Trust vote pre-authorization submitted. Submitted by Family Trust Representative. Status locked until session open. My heart pounded. She's already voted, my brother whispered. The result was sealed. Neither of us knew which side she chose. And in less than 12 hours, the decision would either unite us or erase one of us completely. My brother and I stared at the screen as if it might suddenly reveal the answer out of guilt. Trust vote pre. Authorization submitted. Status locked until session open. No preview, no hint. No percentage shift. Just a sealed decision made by the woman who had unknowingly raised 2 rivals and accidentally become the referee of their war. He exhaled slowly. We need to see her. I checked the time. Come 4:02 p.m. She won't sleep tonight, I said. Neither will we. We drove separately, not out of mistrust, but out of habit. The house looked the same as it always had. Warm lights, perfect lawn, the illusion of stability. Inside, she was sitting at the dining table, the same head seat where she once raised a glass and called me useless. But tonight, there was no audience, just her, and a folder in front of her. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, but in certainty. You both finally decided to show up together, she said quietly. No sarcasm, no performance. My brother sat to her right, I sat to her left. For a moment, none of us spoke. Then she pushed the folder toward the center. I didn't understand most of it, she admitted. Lawyers explained. Advisors explained. That man Victor explained. Her eyes lifted to mine briefly. He said this vote would decide which of my sons leads. My brother swallowed. And what did you think? I asked gently. She looked at both of us for a long time. I thought I already decided that years ago. The honesty of that sentence didn't feel cruel. It felt exhausted. I thought choosing one of you would make the other stronger, she continued. Competition builds excellence. That's what I believed. It builds resentment, my brother said quietly. She closed her eyes for a second. I see that now. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it ever had in our childhood. I submitted the vote because they told me delay would create instability. She said, but before you ask what I chose, I need to ask you something. We waited. If I had praised you equally, she looked at me, would you still have done all this? The question was clean, direct, no defense. I didn't answer immediately. Probably, I said finally. But not like this. She nodded slowly, then turned to my brother. And if I had criticized you more, would you have become weaker? He stared at the table. No, he said. I would have become real sooner. The air shifted, not hostile, not warm. Honest? You both built power, she whispered. That neither of you built peace. That landed heavier than any insult she had ever thrown. I won't tell you how I voted, she said, because it doesn't matter anymore. It matters to the board, my brother replied. It shouldn't matter to you. Silence. Then she did something unexpected. She reached into the folder and pulled out another document. This was Victor's idea, she said. A contingency clause. I took the paper and scanned it. My pulse slowed, then accelerated. It was an amendment to the trust. If both beneficiaries, my brother and I, signed a joint leadership agreement before session opened, the trust vote would automatically convert into a dual alignment directive, meaning her vote would not remove one of us. It would mandate shared executive oversight. If we signed together, if we refused, the original vote would stand. What did you choose? My brother asked carefully. She met his eyes. I chose to stop choosing between you. The room went quiet. Victor hadn't just tested us. He had cornered us. Either we remained competitors and let her vote divide us, or we formalized equality and forced the board to adapt. You planned this? My brother muttered. She shook her head. I agreed to it. That's different. The clock read 1:58 p.m., 2 minutes until midnight, 8 hours until session open. Do you want control? She asked softly. Yes, my brother and I said at the same time. She gave the faintest smile, then learned to share it. We drove back to my apartment together this time. No separate cars, no separate strategies, just silence filled with calculation. Inside, we reviewed the agreement line by line. Joint oversight, mutual veto power, shared public narrative. No unilateral restructuring without dual approval. It was clean, brilliant, terrifying, 50-50, he said quietly. Yes? And no revenge clauses hidden in fine print? I looked at him. If I wanted revenge now, I wouldn't sign. He studied my face for a long moment. Then he picked up the pen. But before he could press it to paper, my phone buzzed again. Breaking news alert. The financial outlet had updated the story. Sources indicate imminent leadership replacement. They were expecting blood. Market analysts were predicting volatility. Stock futures were already shifting. If we signed and forced shared leadership, the market would interpret it as instability or innovation. It depended on narrative control. You realize, my brother said slowly, if we do this and fail, we both go down. I know. And if we succeed, we redefine the structure. He let out a breath. You always wanted to prove you weren't useless. Yes. You don't need to anymore. The words didn't feel like surrender. They felt like acknowledgement. And you, I said quietly, don't need to carry her expectations alone. He gave a short nod. Midnight passed. The city outside dimmed into late night calm. I picked up the pen, then paused, because something still felt unfinished. Before we sign, I said, there's one thing we need to clarify. He looked at me carefully. This isn't a truce, it's a partnership. Less. And partnerships require transparency. He nodded slowly. So tell me, I continued, did you ever believe I was useless? The question wasn't strategic. It was personal. He didn't dodge it. No, he said. I believed if I admitted you were capable, I'd lose my edge. I absorbed that. And you, he asked, did you ever actually hate me? I thought about it, about the dinners, the comparisons, the silent competitions. No, I said honestly. I hated being unseen. The weight in the room shifted, not gone, but lighter. He slid the document toward me. Then, let's be seen, we both placed our signatures on the agreement. At that exact moment, the trust system updated, dual alignment clause activated, trust vote converted. My phone buzzed with a confirmation from the board secretary. Family trust directive received. Session will proceed under joint oversight mandate. It was done, but not finished. Because as I leaned back in my chair, a final email notification appeared. From Victor, subject line. Now the real test begins. I opened it. Inside was a single sentence. Leadership shared under pressure either forges legacy or accelerates collapse. I closed the laptop slowly. Morning was coming. In a few hours, the board would announce the new structure. The market would react. Executives would reposition. And the world would learn that two brothers, once divided by ego and expectation, were now bound by equal power. But equality doesn't erase ambition, and power shared is power constantly negotiated. I looked at my brother across the room, not as a rival, not as a shadow, but as something far more complex, a partner I once tried to destroy. The sun began to rise over the skyline, and as the first light cut through the glass windows, illuminating the signatures still drying on the page, I realized something unsettling. Revenge had built me. But this would test who I truly was without it. By the time the sun fully rose, the world had already begun speculating about our fate. Financial channels debated instability. Analysts predicted chaos. Social media framed it as a family corporate war. The narrative was dramatic, distorted, and incomplete. At 9 a.m., the board session opened. My brother and I sat side by side in my apartment, two laptops open, identical access codes displayed on our screens. No more shadows, no more anonymous influence. The chairman cleared his throat. Due to a directive from the family trust, executive oversight will transition to a joint leadership structure effective immediately. A pause. Both strategic advisory and regional executive authority will now operate under shared governance between the two primary stakeholders. There it was, not a firing. Not a victory, a merger. The market reacted within minutes, a brief dip, then a surge. Investors interpreted it as bold restructuring rather than scandal. The narrative shifted from family feud to next generation leadership transition. Control, once fragile and secretive, was now formal and visible. After the session ended, my brother closed his laptop slowly. Well, he said, we're either geniuses or idiots. Probably both, I replied. The next few weeks were brutal. Shared leadership isn't poetic. It's friction. Every decision required alignment. Every strategy demanded debate. We clashed over hiring choices, expansion timelines, marketing tone, capital allocation. But something unexpected happened. Our differences weren't weaknesses. They were balance. He understood internal operations with surgical precision. He knew how to manage teams, maintain morale, and navigate corporate politics. I understood leverage, growth acceleration, market positioning, and long-term capital strategy. Where he was cautious, I was bold. Where I was cold, he was relational. For the first time, our skills complemented instead of competed. But the real confrontation came at the next family dinner. Same house, same table, same head seat. Only this time, when our mother lifted her glass, she didn't choose a side. I'd like to toast, she said carefully, to both my sons, for teaching me that comparison builds distance, but collaboration builds strength. The room was quiet. My uncle avoided eye contact. My cousin wasn't recording this time. My brother looked at me, a faint smirk forming, and I realized something powerful. The revenge I thought I wanted, to see them shocked, humbled, speechless, felt smaller than the silence we had created simply by standing equal. After dinner, as guests left, my mother stopped me near the door. You smiled that night, she said softly. When I called you useless. Yes! I thought it meant you didn't care. It meant I was done needing approval. Her eyes shimmered, not dramatically, but honestly. I'm proud of you, she whispered. The words didn't explode inside me the way they would have years ago. They settled, calmly, because I no longer built for that sentence. Weeks turned into months. The company stabilized under our joint direction. We restructured inefficient divisions, invested in innovation, cleaned out internal opportunists who had tried to exploit the instability. One of them turned out to be the source of the media leak. He was removed quietly, professionally, without spectacle. No revenge. Just consequence. Victor met us for the first time in person 3 months later. A private conference room. Floor to ceiling glass, city stretching beneath us. He studied us carefully. You both look different, he said. We are, my brother replied. Victor's gaze shifted to me. And you, did you get what you wanted? I thought about that question longer than expected. 3 years ago, what I wanted was simple. Power, proof, vindication. But sitting there now with equal authority and no hidden agenda, I realized something uncomfortable. Revenge had been fuel, but it was never the destination. I got perspective. I said, finally. Victor nodded slowly. Good, because power without resentment lasts longer. As he left, he added one final sentence. The world will test your unity. Don't let old narratives write new decisions. That night, my brother and I stood on my balcony overlooking the city. Be honest, he said. If that trust clause didn't exist, would you have removed me? I didn't lie. Yes, he nodded. And if Mom had voted against you, I would have built something bigger. I replied. He laughed softly. I believe that. We stood in silence for a moment. You know, he said, I used to think being the favorite meant winning, and I used to think being underestimated meant losing. And now, I looked at the skyline lights blinking like signals in the dark. Now I think both were distractions. The truth was simple. I wasn't useless. He wasn't superior. We were shaped by the same environment, just molded differently. Revenge gave me discipline. Humiliation gave me focus. Silence gave me strategy. But forgiveness, unexpected, reluctant forgiveness, gave me freedom. Months later, during a leadership summit, we were asked a question on stage. What was the turning point in your success story? My brother looked at me, giving me the floor. I leaned into the microphone. The turning point, I said calmly, was the night I stopped trying to prove someone wrong and started building something right. The audience applauded. But my mind flashed back to that dinner table, to the laughter, to my mother's voice saying some people just exist, and to my own reply. Oh, really? Yes, really. Because in the end, I didn't destroy my brother. I didn't expose my family. I didn't burn down the system that underestimated me. I outgrew it. The greatest revenge wasn't humiliation. It was evolution. Years later, when the company expanded globally under our joint leadership, no one remembered the restructuring drama. No one talked about the trust vote. No one knew how close we came to destroying each other. They only saw two brothers who led with precision and balance. But sometimes late at night, I still remember that first smile, the one I gave when they laughed. It wasn't the smile of a broken son. It was the smile of someone who had just decided he would never ask for permission to matter again. And that decision changed everything. The end.